one second. All right. Welcome, everyone. We are talking about Israel in the latter days. We're talking about the prophecies, if you will, from Genesis 48 and 49 and how they connect to a whole bunch of other prophecies found throughout the Hebrew Bible. I have Betty Gibbon Elisheva, my good friend for many, many years, and we're talking about some of these things already, and we're happy to have all of you with us. Betty, what I was going to say, you know, it's sometimes like when we talk about the sins, if you will, of Reuben or Simeon and Levi, you know, and then you deal with what is in some ways a prophecy for their descendants, and you're thinking, well, what, you know, is that forever and always? I mean, in some ways, Levi is scattered throughout all the tribes. That's an easy one to identify.
Right.
But one thing that always hits me when I think about the descendants of someone who did bad. Of course, you have Ezekiel 18 and Ezekiel 33 to consider. But a real practical example that I think is a beautiful story is the sons of Korah.
Absolutely. Yes.
It's one of my favorite stories in all the Bible. Korah is killed for his treachery. And the Bible makes it clear in the book of Numbers that the sons of Korah didn't die. And then later we meet this whole group, these Psalms that are written by the sons of Korah, where they finally get it. You know, it's better to be a gatekeeper in the house of the Lord than it is whatever. So anyway, but by the same token, Simeon and Levi, I mean, that's bad. Your father's deathbed, and he's just, you know, he's letting them have it.
That's true.
You know.
However, Levi was kind of redeemed because, you know, he most likely did not, or the tribe, you know, went with Moses after the golden calf, you know, whoever is for me, whatever. And then they became, you know, the priestly tribe. So I don't know. I think there's redemption for everyone who makes a bad decision, but we have choices to make.
Yeah.
And that's what's important. It's also interesting that in the blessing of Moshe about Reuben, he said, "Let Reuben live and not die."
Right.
And let his descendants forever be among the number of nations. So, you know, although his descendants were let's see, Datan and Abiram,
you
know, in the thing with Korach, and they died, yet the third son, On ben Peli, did not die. So he didn't die. He lived on. Anyway, just some thoughts. There's so much there.
Oh yeah. No, and I know that a lot of people will associate the tribes with various nations. I know that may even come up in our conversation today. People like Yair Davidi and some of those kind of things. And while I respect that material, I have all the books. You know, I've read those over the years, and that's typically not the view that I take. But nonetheless, you know, mine I see mine as more. I think there were groupings, but you know, when I think about the tribes, Amos. As corn is sifted through a sieve, yet not the least grain will fall to the ground. You know, they're scattered throughout all nations as corn is sifted.
Right.
But anyway, so I'm looking forward to this conversation, Betty, and I know you've been dealing and searching and studying associated with the tribes. So as you think of other things and you feel like jumping back in, jump back in.
Well, I will later. You know me, there's always one more thing. But,
that's all right. Good. That's good.
I'm going to share with everyone who wants to talk. I think Damon is up next. So
all right.
Thanks, Russ. Love you.
Okay, babe. Love you too. All right. And Damon, let me make sure I unmuted you. Yep.
I think so.
Hey, brother, what's going on?
Shabbat shalom.
How are you?
Doing pretty well this morning.
Good.
And it sounds like you had me wait for a reason, and good. I'm glad that you uh, brought forth, especially the things from Isaiah 11 uh, that you had mentioned to me was kind of like a sneak preview last week. So
Right,
I
yeah.
didn't want to jump too far ahead of that. But as you went through and were commenting on other things, um, especially this idea of these days that we're looking back on,
Yeah.
kind of to establish a pattern of things to come. I wanted to comment a little bit about that because there are some very interesting things in the ancient Near Eastern cultural context, which I think really add uh, a new dimension to what is going on here.
Okay.
Um, so the first thing I want to do is go look at Isaiah 41 and kind of jump in here and then elaborate a little bit on what Isaiah is actually referring to. And that is, let's see, starting in verse 21. Produce your cause, says the Lord, bring forth your strong reasons, says the King of Jacob. Let them bring them forth. Show us what shall happen. Let them show the former things, whatever they are, that we may consider them, know the latter end of them, or declare to us things to come. Show the things that are to come hereafter, that we may know that you are gods. Very interesting phrase there. Yes, do good or do evil, and you can kind of guess what he's referring to there, that we may be dismayed and behold it together. Behold, you are of nothing, and your work is of naught, and abomination is he that chooses you. He's talking about a pagan practice here of divination that the people were using, which was actually fairly common in the ancient Near East. If we even go back into the story of Jacob, we actually saw a little bit of that when Rebekah stole the teraphim of Laban. They would use those household gods, idols, which as he refers to earlier in the chapter here, for purposes of divination and for showing things to come, not only because they were ancestors, but also because there was an astrological aspect to that divination. So I want to dive into that just a little bit, especially when you quoted from Isaiah 46, verses 9 through 10, when God was saying, he declares the end from the beginning.
Yeah.
And that is, of course, a reference back to Genesis 1, when God created the signs in the heavens. It says the lights in the heavens are for signs, among other things. And this is a reference to astrological signs that have meaning. So one of the things that was very common in the ancient Near East is that there would be like a pagan myth, let's say the myth of Osiris and his death. And those things would be represented by constellations. Osiris, for example, was the constellation of Orion. Okay. And by looking at the interaction of these constellations or tracing their patterns in the sky, the ancients would be able to understand, okay, this is telling us something about what's going to happen here on the earth. So one of the interesting ways in which we pick up that kind of aspect in the Bible itself is we have, for instance, 12 tribes. There are 12 signs in the zodiac, and that's no coincidence. If you look at Ezekiel 1, you'll see Ezekiel describing God's heavenly throne. And you'll notice there are 4 angels with 4 different faces. Compare that with Numbers 2. Notice how many banners, how many standards there are in the camp. There aren't 12, there are only 4. Okay, and that's no coincidence. They gathered 3 tribes around each one, and there was a main tribe and 2 sub-tribes. So what's going on with this idea of blessing right at the deathbed is that we're intended to see it as it were a mystery play, just like a pagan mystery play where they had things acted out in a certain ritualistic way, which was either intended to bring about a specific result on earth or intended to foreshadow something. Okay. interesting thing about how these mystery plays were done, they were usually done at temples and set to music.
You
For people who,
1 second, let me just jump in. You're going into all kind of interesting things, but I'm just curious. I want to
yep.
make sure I follow. So, but are you suggesting that Genesis 49 is somehow connected
It's a
to ancient mystery play?
yes, in a certain very specific way, and I'll go into that in just a little bit. So the way that these ancient mystery plays were done is they were usually performed at a temple and set to music. There are actually musical notation that are recorded in the Bible, mostly in the Psalms, but also in other places. One of the few places that those cantillation marks show up is, interestingly enough, Genesis 1 through 3. That was intended to be sung and performed as a mystery play, representing or foreshadowing something to come.
Hmm.
Okay, so as Jacob lives his life, and as he's going through certain events, it's not called out there in the text. But what we're seeing, especially as the later prophets bring it out, is that's a mystery play. We're supposed to look at that and see something in the future. Okay, now you're bringing that out in a different way. But what I'm saying is there is actually an ancient Near Eastern cultural context that says, yes, this is exactly how the text was intended to be understood, that these are foreshadowing things to come. For instance, Jacob dividing himself into two bands.
I was just going to add that Dave and Patty Tyler have done a couple of lectures and really dug into the musical notations and so forth of the Bible, and they've done a lot of research on that. So I was just looking. He's got some notes along the column there in the chat section on our Zoom call. So he's going to check that out too. So maybe you can share that, Damon, anything that you have on those first three chapters. Yeah, Near Eastern culture is a very important part of anything we do if we're looking to understand, at least to some degree. But I think, and you would probably agree, I see a lot of times people, I think they get lost in the weeds on some of that because it doesn't necessarily mean, like sometimes people go, I read the Epic of Gilgamesh and this proves, and they really I think they go long on speculation, short on evidence sometimes to make those connections. So not everything in ancient Near Eastern culture is going to shed light on a biblical text. You would agree with that, right? I mean, it certainly helps us to sometimes it certainly helps, but.
And just one last thought.
Yep.
The age of Pisces started around 81. And I don't think that's a coincidence, especially with the fish symbolism.
Okay. All right. You're talking about because of the task associated with like Jeremiah 16 then?
Basically, that was the time of fishing.
Yeah. Okay.
That was the time of fishing and regathering. That age of Pisces, which is the past 2,000 years.
I remember when I was a little boy, I quoted enough Bible verses and I won a little fish to put on my vest. So I was a fisher of men. I think a lot of us have come through that. I love that idea. I really do. I think it certainly ties in with the prophetic mission anyway. So good stuff, man. Hey, hang around. We'll probably say something else that'll make you jump up. You ready? All right. Thank you, Damon. Karen. How are you, Karen?
Good. So you ever think about something all week long?
I have thought about stuff all week long sometimes. What are you thinking about all week this week?
Oh, I was thinking of last week when we talked about the separation of the bread and the manna.
Okay.
In Deuteronomy 8. I've just been thinking about that all week long.
What'd you figure out?
I see the bread as more like religion and laws of men, and the manna as what comes from the mouth of God.
All right. So help us understand. I think I get you're saying that man can't live by bread alone, meaning the things like these traditions and so forth. But the manna would be what comes out of God's mouth. Is that what you
Right.
mean?
That's what I mean.
All right.
And when you look at the biblical text, the generation who grew up on the manna and was separated from the bread, they're the ones that fought the giants, drove them out of the land. And I kind of see people coming to United Israel as doing something similar initially. They separate themselves from the bread and they go looking for the manna. And so it's good to have people like you, Ross, and Dr. Tabor, and this group where we can get tools and resources to help us find that manna.
Well, and not everybody cares what they eat. We know that, not everybody's careful in their diet.
People like to be told what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a big lack of critical thinking. You're told not to question authority. You're told not to question the people who are the head of your religion or whatever. But some people come to a point where they don't want that anymore.
Yeah.
It's not doing what it did to begin with.
Right.
And they go searching for something and they separate themselves from that. They wander around in the wilderness looking for something from God. And sometimes it's hard to find that. So it's good to have groups like this where we can have tools and resources to help us find what we're looking for.
I say it all the time. I think this group is wonderful for the very reasons that you've stated. You can come here and discuss things, and people can feel free to be as theologically oriented, as they wish. There are people in our group who are Christian. There are people who are Jewish. There are people who are B'nai Noah, somewhere in between. There are people like me who don't really claim an identity in that sense. But I think that the fact that we can all come together and have discussions like this is one of the things that makes it so appealing to people who want a safe place to kind of ask questions, and I think that's, and not just ask questions, share their views on things, So
yeah. And I see us, as far as the prophecy and things like that and what that's going to look like in the future, I don't believe in the end of the world, because the end, at every end, there's a new beginning.
Yeah.
Yes, an end of an age. Let's say we're still in the age of the gods. And, at some point, people are going to stop believing in Tinkerbell. You know what I'm saying?
Say it's not so.
Yeah. And that's how I view, how do I say, other gods, because it's it's kind of a singularity, a hive mind. They exist because people believe in them.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you don't believe in them, they don't exist anymore. So like in Peter Pan, Tinkerbell's going around sprinkling her magic fairy dust, making people fly. But then at some point in the story, they stop believing in her, and there's that clap your hands, children of the world, don't let Tink die. And I see it kind of like that. At some point, it's not going to be a violent thing. It's going to be, slowly letting her go.
I read
It wasn't my situation, and I think that someday, worldwide, that's going to happen.
And who are you equating with Tinkerbell, if I can ask? Is there?
Not being specific. I'm being vague.
Okay. All right. I'm just asking. I tell you, I have read recently, I'll have to dig it up. I've read quite a bit over the last few months, but there was an article I'm trying to place. It's escaping, but it was about the death of the gods. And, it's as we work through a lot of this ancient literature, at some point in history, these gods who you would never have convinced the people at the time that God would just disappear in history, but it happens over and over and over. And some atheistic approach, some people who are atheists would say, you know how there are all these gods, Zeus and Apollo, and, go through and name them. They say, well, I just believe in one less, because you don't believe in those, do you? Nope, I don't believe in Zeus. I don't believe in this. I don't believe in that. And they would say, well, you still believe in Yahweh or Jehovah, and I just believe in one less. That's their view sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I was asking you if Tinkerbell represented something else there, but you don't have to say. I'm just curious.
And maybe at some point, like us, they will only believe in the one who brings the manna.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what that looks like in real life, but, I know what it looks like in my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or how that come across and, how that figures into, not the end times. What were you calling it?
The latter days.
The latter days.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as we work through these different ideas, it's by the way, I just saw a note. Hold on just a second. JJ said it sounds like something that Ricky Gervais once said, one less God. That may be. I don't think that's where I got it, but it could be. But no, I think the idea is what I really, again, like about this group is it is a place where we can have really tough conversations and we can think about what are those things that are really kind of on the top of our mind or troubling us, or I think that's a good deal.
And I don't see myself as a fisher. I see myself personally as more of a God killer.
Yeah. What?
Just putting those things aside.
Yeah. I know, I like to think of myself as an iconoclast in that, false gods for sure, and idolatry and things like that. It's like we've all kind of enlisted on this journey to stamp out falsity. And that becomes a little bit unnerving to some. Some people they stop and they say, I can't go any further. Well, I've always believed that no matter where this leads me, I'm in. I'm in. I'm telling you, I'm just going to keep on digging and keep on studying, keep on learning, and so that's my goal, is just keep pushing forward. And I think that's what I like about this group is most of you have said the same thing. You just want to know.
Yeah. And whatever it takes to get there, that's what I'm doing. Whether it's science that helps bring me there, or ancient history, or ancient texts, or divine revelation. Even at some point, I'm talking about dreams. There are resources out there, and you can use your critical thinking and come to the place that you're supposed to be.
Yeah. Good stuff. What else you got, Karen?
That's it for today.
No, don't say that. You might hang around and get some more ideas. Just stick around. Something else will hit you in a little bit. Come on back.
Okay. All right.
All right.
See you later.
Dr. Tabor. All right, hold on. There you go. How are you?
Come on.
I got you. I got you.
You're doing it.
Yeah,
you're taking over the controls. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just the co-pilot.
Go ahead. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. So, Karen always gets me to jump in and say something.
Yeah.
Sigmund Freud is well known as the great 20th century psychologist, but he also wrote a little teeny book that I have my students read that you may have heard of, some of you, called The Future of an Illusion. That's the English title. And what he essentially argues, it's pretty easy to summarize, is that gods and theories about the cosmos and its meaning and purpose, think of the fire in Los Angeles, did all those homes that burn, did God choose each one who would be saved and who wouldn't? And so those are all the people he decided should lose their pets. And so he wrote this book called The Future of an Illusion. Uh, what's the difference in a delusion and an illusion? I think it's a German book, but the English translators chose the word illusion, where you imagine something is there when it really isn't. So it's an illusion. Magicians have illusions. That's how magic works, stage magicians. And so I sometimes have said, just jokingly, but I'm serious, I agree with him. 99.99% of gods, religions, theories about the cosmos, I think they're projected illusions. And he used the word projected. As you project onto the universe the meaning that you wish was there.
Yeah.
Now, as far as I know, is a atheist or was an atheist. And I can't imagine that he prayed to a power of all powers or anything of that sort. So he would probably say, no, 100%. The universe is atoms and the void. As Jacques Monod said, you could say atoms in space or whatever. In other words, matter, which is a form of energy, and space. And you throw in time in terms of our own measure of things, our own sense of things. But with that 1%, just kind of playing around with that idea, like if you say, I think Freud's right, 99.9% of things people think about the cosmos, they're probably projecting it. He called it wish fulfillment. I wish that the world was just. I wish that everything happened for a reason. You wish it because then you would feel comforted, you would feel guided, you would feel led, and that feels good. To think your loved ones went to heaven when they died, to think you're going to meet them, to think you're going to see all your pets, whatever, is so you would think then that that would eliminate the Hebrew Bible, as one more illusion. But what's so striking about it is it doesn't buy into, in most of the core texts, that whole package that's in the ancient world down to our own world of life after death, heaven and hell, a final judgment, and on. All the things that people consider religion, it doesn't really buy into those much. I think your favorite verse and my favorite verse on that topic is Deuteronomy 29:29.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you take it out of context, the secret things belong to Hashem, and the things he's revealed belong to us. So what has he revealed? Essentially the 10 words, how to live. What does God require of you? The force of all forces and so forth. And then you can go to the philosophers, and it's almost like name the force of all forces. What are you going to name it? Well, you can't name it because it's the force of all forces. So you'd be limiting it. And then we get into our concept of Yehovah and Elohim, used in the singular, the force of all forces, and so forth. So I think that's largely where a lot of this group finds itself. I think it's pretty defensible scientifically and philosophically that we all sense, and I've mentioned before, I'll mention it again because we always have new people. Two of my favorite verses in the New Testament will surprise you. And that's my field. I could pick out a dozen top verses that I like. And yes, I would include 1 Corinthians 13. I like it, okay? We see through a glass darkly and later face to face and all that. But my favorite are, in him we live and move and have our being, and he is not very far from each one of us. And I think that universal, and those are Greek poets that, according to the book of Acts, chapter 17, are quoted by Paul to the Stoics and Epicureans of his day. But if you think about, one is from Epimenides and the other is from a poet named Erastus. So whoever wrote Acts, I don't know that Paul spoke that speech, pulled these two concepts out. They are so Hebraic, it is unbelievable. They're the ground of Genesis 1. You know, let us make man and so forth in our image and so forth. And you don't really have to go much beyond that, and other than faith. The just one shall live by faith, Habakkuk. And he's talking there about predictions of the future and what's going to happen, right? Habakkuk 2. A righteous person lives by faith. So what is faith? That God is in control of the universe, and what will be in terms of those divine purposes. And it could be that it's impossible to know. I think Karen was getting into this, what's going to come later. Could it be like the mentality of an ant compared to the smartest person on earth today? You know, I mean, just as an analogy of difference.
Yeah.
So that what it's all about is so beyond our comprehension that these little solutions that are given by people that go in for eschatology and what's going to happen in the future and this and that would just be almost ridiculous in terms of what might really be the case in terms of the mysteries of the universe. But I love the Hebrew Bible for that reason. If it had page after page laying out all these formulas of how everything's going to work, and there's this, like the New Testament does, you know, it has all this stuff about Christ will appear in the clouds and the dead will rise, and then this and this and this. But the Hebrew Bible doesn't have any of that. And it basically ends with telling Job, where were you?
Yeah.
You know, are you really in charge, and you can make a judgment? And yet Job is allowed to answer. I know that my Redeemer lives, most of you know, is a very badly misinterpreted verse quoted at all funerals, including Joe Biden's funeral this week. And my family's tired of me.
You mean Jimmy Carter? You mean
things.
Jimmy Carter's funeral?
Oh, what did I say? Biden?
Joe Biden.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Hope I wasn't a prophet there.
Yeah.
I guess I was thinking Biden said it, but thank you for that correction.
No, I knew what you meant. I just wanted to
Well,
make sure
everybody knew what I
everyone
meant,
was
but-
scrambling to Google right when you said that.
No, I hope not.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, what Job is saying is it's an older text. We think it uses El Shaddai,
Yeah.
but it's giving the Hebrew solution to what's called theodicy, which is, we call it the problem of evil. It's really the problem of meaning. How are you going to have meaning in a chaotic universe? Well, you can project meaning onto the universe that comes from what you want. That would be Freud's point. Don't do that. Well, then how are you going to have any meaning? And what the amazing thing about Job is, what he's really saying is, when I die, this is it. It's very difficult to translate, but the essential idea is, I think I have a case with God, but I'm going to write it with an iron pen on a rock, and I'll be dead. But someday, someone's going to come and read that and say, you know, I think Job has a case here.
Mm-hmm.
I think God has something to answer for. And that's a biblical position. So he says, I know, even though I'm going to go, my Goel will come. Actually, it means sort of like my lawyer for my defense, because he's sick of listening to these friends with all of their theories of how the universe works. You know, if you read Job's friends, oh, they got it down, right? They know exactly why all this happened. Basically, you deserved it. God is just, and it always works out if you'll just have faith. And I know that's comforting, but Job's answer is, I have to be true to my own thoughts and myself and what I think. And it's a position of faith. It's actually a position of faith. He's saying, I don't know how it's going to work out, but I do know that my case is a just one. And if there's any justice, it will come up. So I'm going to write it on a rock so somebody will read it. Well, it's written better than on a rock. It's printed in every Bible in the universe now. for how many thousands of years. So his case is there. And whether you go with the prologue and the epilogue and all that, it doesn't matter. The core is there. And I think it's so instructive. Where are you going to have a book like that that doesn't give the answers?
Mm-hmm.
Think about that. It basically says, can you even formulate the question,
Yep.
much less understand it? And I know that can be a cop out to people that see themselves as atheists, like, oh, well, anybody could say that. It's all going to work out. We just can't understand. But how could we possibly think we would understand when we're barely scratching the surface of things? So, anyway, I just wanted to throw that in. The
Yeah.
future of an illusion. So, yeah, Tinkerbell's going to go. And maybe all the other illusions. But you know what won't go? Is the one in whom we live and move and have our being, because you can't deny that, or you'd be denying your very being.
Yeah.
And also that it or he or she or the entity, the force of all, is not very far from each one of us. And that's a great comfort to know. Turn to me and be saved, all the ends of the earth. So I love this group for that reasons. We can all bring our possible speculations, maybe our delusions and illusions to the table and talk about them. And we have all of these texts, some of which maybe aren't the most inspirational or useful, like we've talked, like the sacrificial system or something, but still, it's just such a profound book. Every time I hold it in my hand, I get that thrill.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how unique that we have this collection of writings. And I'll finally end by saying this, and, Ross doesn't need this, but it's so true. Nobody that I know of is going through the text like Ross is right now. Nobody. If you've got somebody on YouTube, please tell me, because I'll work them into my schedule as well. I'm talking about line by line, word by word, concept by concept, carefully going through the texts of the Torah. And I assume you're going to keep on with this in other ways. So you're lucky to be here, folks. I hope you know it. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I appreciate your time, brother. All right. Let's see. How about Todd and Angel? How are you? Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. That's a hard guy to follow right there, you know.
Hey, that's your fault. Look, I like your shirt.
Oh, you like it?
Yeah.
Yeah, she got it for me.
It's nice.
That's 2 now I had in the collection.
That's cool, though.
That'll work. I got a little different take. I was finding it interesting in verse 5 through 7 when he was talking about Simeon and Levi.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that, the weapons of violence with their swords and cursed on their anger and everything, but wasn't Levi the priesthood later down the road?
Sure.
It's kind of strange.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when there is a contradiction here in that in verse 6 where in their anger they slew a man. I thought they slew Shechem, like a lot of people.
Yeah.
Not just unless that's using the term a man as multiples. I don't know.
Yeah. Let's see. Just while we're right here. Yeah. I'll see what it says. Go ahead. Keep going and we'll look at it. Okay.
Well, another topic on that we were talking about this morning too was apparently the sons never told Jacob what they did to Joseph, because when he does the blessings, he never mentions anything about that.
Yeah.
I mean, he does mention Reuben, but and the other bad stuff that all the rest of them did, but he never mentioned what they did to Joseph. So I wonder why they never told him.
Yeah. Well, and just to add one little quick point, Todd, not to distract you, but or derail what you got going there, but if you look at the sources, it is interesting to play that out and say, if there's something to this, because some would argue there's not, but if there is, it sometimes explains gaps in the story, like Anyway, that's just another option. So
And we're full of options.
we are. We have some options. That's right.
And on a side note, when you were going through Isaiah, I started reading the first part of it and ran across the seven spirits.
Yep.
You know, that's mentioned twice in Revelation and once in Enoch.
Yeah.
There's seven spirits. I mean, Enoch names them too. But in Revelation, it just in two different places, it mentions the seven spirits.
Yeah.
I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's a fascinating text. Isaiah 11, the whole thing, it's one of those texts that you can really spend, you could spend almost a life in dealing with Isaiah, but Isaiah 11 is really full of interesting things. Like I just touched on a couple of things in the class. You know, if you think about who is the shoot from the stump, what is the stump? What is this talking about? And it is the shoot also, we have another word that's used for a branch, the netzer. Is the netzer the same as the choter? And now I know later Christianity sort of conflates all of these, because for Christianity, Jesus is every prophecy points to Jesus, basically. In fact, it gets problematic when you bring in, well, what do we do with John the Baptist? Is there anything left of John the Baptist? Because at least in one gospel text, it says that, the prophet said something about John. So what is that? Anyway, we get this idea, but I think when you look at the complexity in the Hebrew Bible, particularly the prophets, and even more so like Isaiah 11, there's quite a bit to unpack there, as we say.
Yeah.
It's some good stuff. I love it. And we didn't even get into, because I started to, when I first started scratching notes down, like after today, when you all do whatever you do, when we end this, I'm going to go ahead and begin reading the first Torah portion of Exodus and making my notes. Originally, I was going to take a couple of passages, like I was going to deal with Ad ki yavo Shiloh, until Shiloh comes, or however we're going to translate Genesis 49:10, and look at that in, do we have any examples of that in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and what does Jewish literature say about it? What did Christianity do with it? Because within Genesis 49, it's as if when he says, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen in the latter days, people pounce on 49 and say, well, I have to find the latter days in Genesis 49. And so they begin to look, and you look at, it quickly becomes apparent that Judah and Joseph, those two prophecies or blessings, are the best. You want one of those, right? And we get quite a bit of the prophecies. People try to tie that in. So, but anyway, I got off of that and decided to go with a more broadly looking at the two verbs. But yeah, there's some fun stuff to do with that too. So if you have any insight on that, let us know.
I will. That's all I got.
That's it. All right. Well, good to see you. Shabbat shalom. Hang around. I'm sure something else will pop up.
Okie dokie.
All righty. Eric. Shabbat shalom. How are you, my brother?
Well, thank you, Ross. Shabbat shalom, man.
Good to see you here.
To all. Yes, sir. Yeah, I was some deep thoughts the Eli Shiva and Yaakov, and of course, interesting stuff, Karen and Todd and Angel.
Yep.
Or Todd, so I'm easily distracted. So I was just in regards to, you mentioned synoptic histories, this synoptic reading of like Judges and Samuel and Kings. Recommended this before.
Your connection is a little bit sketchy, Eric. I don't know if you've got a place you can stand where it's a little bit better.
Let me try. Yeah, hold on. Here we go.
All right, let's try that.
Yeah, so in regards to the histories, the synoptic reading of the histories, and Samuel, Kings, Chronicles, and Judges. Right? You recommended a
Oh, the
book on
book.
that. I haven't
Yeah,
gotten it.
the book,
I haven't
Newsom's book.
acquired it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was, and you've taught on this portion for a while, and you've highlighted some of the things in Hosea
Mm-hmm.
that are found in the latter portions of Genesis,
Yeah.
and how that passage in Hosea 6 on the road to Shechem. I think Todd, he may have mentioned it, but how where's you look at Shechem in the book of Judges, and you see in chapter 9, the mention of Shechem, and I think you get someone saying something on somewhere, I think a mountain, Mount Gerizim, and it's right there, Shechem to the people, as far as where it's at and its origin. Was it bought? Was it acquired via, with bow and sword?
Yeah,
Was
did
it?
he take it in a fight, or was it given to him, or did he buy it? I mean, that's the question, right?
Yeah, and Hosea mentions Ephraim more than any of the prophets. So he seems to be really digging into this narrative. You see some of the, and so, okay, basically what I was saying, does this make sense? Like, the histories are written from the perspective of one of the prophetic schools or scribal schools, and looking backwards, saying the same issues they're dealing with, the Baalim and the, Baal worship and such, they're saying was the same issue that they had coming out of the wilderness way back when, and they already seen how the kings have failed, and they say, well, the monarchy, so they have a skeptical view of the monarchy, and of course the priesthood as well, which hence the tone of all the prophets with regards to the priests and the prophets.
We
They might be illegitimate priests in regards to the north, in regards to Shechem, but like priest of Baal, like the same thing with Elijah.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. They certainly,
Yeah.
we certainly get. Most people believe that, like, Hosea is talking to the northern kingdom, right? And so you get this impression. It's his whole life. He marries a harlot, and has these 3 children, and the idea that's being conveyed in Hosea is particular to the north. So when we read, there's quite a bit in there that when we read, it's important not to confuse those passages which are talking about the kingdom in the north with the kingdom of Judah. But there are plenty of prophetic utterances that deal specifically with Judah, and generally those say this is to Judah. But when we read Hosea and some of the ideas that are conveyed about the kingdoms of the north, we have to keep that straight. I think that's what you're saying, is you have to place the text in the context, right?
Yeah, that, and I could just see the historian where he's coming from.
Yeah.
The failed monarchy, the failed priest, whatever it was, and they're kind of iconoclastic in tone.
Yeah.
And they're kind of having a revival of their own, trying to go back to Moses, kind of revival
Yep.
of their own. It seems, it's pretty exhilarating, mainly what I'm thinking about, because it gets more complicated later.
Yeah, we read in Hosea.
Anyways,
8.
yeah, I'm just trying to acknowledge your teaching, so to speak, because I know you've been teaching on, not sure.
Well, I appreciate you, Eric. Yeah, you bring up some good points. Hosea 8:4, for instance, they have set up kings, but not by me. I think that's pretty strong. They have made princes, and I knew it not. Of their silver and their gold have they made them idols, that they may be cut off. Then he goes on, but notice he's addressing the north, and that northern. It's not just in the north that we have a problem with the monarchy, but most of you know that because it's clearly something which comes in later. And even in passages which look forward to this coming figure that many people say is the Messiah, and they associate it with a godly, righteous branch, one has to consider the context there and answer the question, did God ever want a human monarch? And that opens up a whole can that I think is worth opening. A little bit scary, but
have you considered there's one parallel I thought in relation to this to Hosea, where it says, you won't call me Baal anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Baali.
Yeah.
That famous passage is kind of, actually, I'm not sure I quite understand it myself. I've heard a lot of sermons and things about it. I mean, it's simple, right? You won't call me, you call me, I don't know, but yeah, it's adultery and versus adultery thing. But in regards to Judges 8, that makes sense because I think it has something to do with Abimelech and these.
Eric, you're
they went back to whoring the word whoring with the Belim.
Yeah.
Whoring with the Belim, that theme. And then of course Hosea said, you won't call me Beli, and then of course harlotry was a big theme in Hosea.
And
Ezekiel.
So was Ephraim. Yep. Well, you're just so you know, your audio is coming through. It's still kind of messed up. So, but
yes, sir. Yeah, we're good.
Good stuff.
I appreciate the thoughts.
Hey, what I appreciate is you put a lot into the writing. So even if your reception isn't good right now and your phone call isn't coming through, put it in writing and we'll follow along in Horeb because you do a really good job there. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, I'm always in a process of redaction.
All right, buddy.
In that regard, Carl, and peace.
Shabbat
Later.
shalom.
Shabbat shalom, y'all. Later.
Hey, Elisheva.
Hey, one more time.
Yeah, no, that's good.
No, this is a quick one, and it's just a question. I was born asking questions. Anyway, my mom and dad used to say that my grandfather said that Betty Kay can ask questions that even God can't answer. Now,
There you go.
that's tongue in cheek, but I've done that all my life. But one of the questions I have is that in the traditional Sabbath blessings in Judaism, the fathers, put their hands on their children and they quote from, 48, 48:29. And he blessed them this day, saying, in thee will Israel bless, saying, God, make thee as Ephraim and Manasseh.
Yeah.
Why would a Jew bless his children, a Jew from Judah, to be like Ephraim and Manasseh and not, may you be like Judah?
Yeah.
The scepter is not to depart, from his feet until Shiloh comes.
Mm-hmm.
So
what's that verse number? What is the verse? Let me just make sure.
It is verse 29 of chapter 48.
48.
The first time, and I've asked several rabbis, and they just kind of beat around the bush. They don't have the answer.
40. Is it 49:28? What?
No, it's 48:28. I'm looking in your Genesis tablet.
I don't have a 28 and 48.
Are you kidding? Well, maybe I better put my light on.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm sorry. It's 20.
Okay, there you go.
20. It's
I was thinking
0,
you found something I didn't notice. Okay.
No.
Well, it is interesting. Now, again, some people don't accept the documentary hypothesis, but if you look at page 282, where E begins in verse 8, 48 verse 8,
right.
E is considered from the north. And this is the view. This is one of the criteria by which scholars made those determinations. They said,
Okay.
it makes sense that the kingdom of Judah, if you bless somebody in Judah, your question is very valid. You would think, well, would you say, make you like Ephraim? Ephraim, are you kidding me? No, Ephraim is not.
Right. I'm vexing Ephraim.
Yeah. So, but interestingly enough, this at least is one answer to that. Doesn't have to be the answer, doesn't have to necessarily be what we settle on. But
Right.
one view is that the reason that says that according to this,
Sure.
and whether it happened historically, I'm not arguing that it didn't. I'm just saying that most scholars would look at that and say, well, yeah, of course it says make you like Ephraim because that's from that's from the northern kingdom, and they would say that. That's at
Right.
least one answer. How about that?
I get that, that it's from E, and that certainly makes a difference
Yeah.
because that's where Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh went. But I still have the question as to why Jews would choose that particular verse. I mean, why wouldn't they say, make you be like Judah?
Well, yeah. It's interesting because most, at least the Orthodox or, faithful fundamentalist Jews would say, well, I don't know why we have to do it, but it says that Jacob said to say this, so I'm going to say
Right.
it. And so I think that's what it is. The beauty, and I know Richard Elliott Friedman and others point this out, the beauty of the Bible as we have it is it is a composite, and it has so much, the sum is better than the parts, as we say. And even in places like this where questions arise, you have the finished product and you rely on that finished product. And that's what has become the reason behind why Jews would do that, make you like Ephraim and Manasseh.
That is, I think, that is a good point. Another point that may or may not be so is that many Jews from Judah look upon converts in two ways. They look upon them as less. They're not supposed to do that, but some do.
Yeah.
Or they look upon them as what they say, having a higher soul or having more insight. And perhaps that's because, a convert has been in both places.
Yeah.
And really understands very well what is, what's going on. And anyway, I kind of wrote about this a little bit in one of my articles that, a rabbi told me once that, and I'm not trying to make myself higher than anybody else, but he just said, Betty, when you speak, people listen to you because you have a different perspective.
Yeah.
You didn't grow up with us, and your perspective is different. So, and we appreciate it. So don't stop speaking. Anyway, that's, I just thought that was interesting.
Yep. Good stuff. Yeah, I think it's all of these questions. That's part of the process of learning. Is if we stop asking the questions, we certainly don't gain the insight that I think we're all searching for. So keep on digging, keep on asking questions, Betty. It's important.
I really don't think that I ever will, unless I just become so senile that I can't think, and hopefully that won't happen.
Well, if you do become senile, we'll put up with you and act like it all makes sense.
You're so kind, and you probably wouldn't even tell me if I did.
I would not tell you, not publicly.
Oh, not publicly. Okay, all right, we'll keep that between us.
Hey,
anyway,
I appreciate you.
Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
All right, bye. And speaking of bye, we're going to tell our YouTube audience goodbye. If you are part of the Yachad and you don't have the link, let us know. We can get you the link. Make sure that you don't miss out. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. And don't look, if you're part of the YouTube audience and you want to be with us next week, join us. But get this Exodus Torah tablet. The link, you can go to horebinstitute.com, and or the link is in the bottom of all our videos. So we look forward to you joining us for our Exodus study, Leaving Egypt. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov.